Abbas and Olmert have committed themselves to a peace deal by the end of next year. The US has pledged full support. So, is peace really possible? Or will it be yet another missed opportunity in the Middle East? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. They were talking peace in Annapolis, but less than 24 hours later, missiles were being fired in Gaza. It makes you wonder, really, if the Middle East Peace Conference in the United States was actually capable of achieving anything. On the face of it, it looked positive. The US playing broker, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert vowing to try to reach a settlement by the end of next year. With just minutes to spare at the Annapolis Peace Conference, they made a joint commitment to resolve all outstanding issues relating to the creation of a Palestinian state. But where it really mattered, in what President Bush calls the Holy Land, an Israeli missile strike was launched on Gaza in response to Hamas mortar fire. At least one policeman was killed. Is there really any hope? Let's try to get some answers to that with our discussion panel today. In Washington, D.C., Ambassador Philip Wilcox. He's president of the Foundation for Middle East Peace, former chief of mission and U.S. Consul General in Jerusalem. Across in London, Abdul Bari Atwan, the editor-in-chief of the London-based pan-Arab newspaper Al-Quds Al-Arabi. And rounding out our team tonight in Jerusalem, Gil Hoffman, the chief political correspondent and analyst for the Jerusalem Post. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Story. I want to start with what's effectively a quick fire round. I'm going to go to each of you and give you 30 seconds or so each to just explain what you felt about Annapolis, what you thought were the most positive, the most negatives, what you got out of them. Let's start with Washington, D.C. and Ambassador Wilcox.
I think it's a positive development. It represents a new commitment by the Bush administration to engage in a way that it has not in the past. There are huge problems to be resolved, but it's a good beginning if there is a strong and intelligent follow-through. That's going to require, I think, not just bilateral negotiations, but a much stronger American leadership brokerage role than we have played in recent years. History shows that without this kind of American mediation, the two sides themselves will not be able to accomplish what must be done.
Ambassador, thank you. Let's go to Abdul Bari Atwan in London for his views.
I believe it is an exaggerated show. We get used to these kind of shows before. We had it in Madrid, we had it in Camp David. It produced nothing, and I don't believe this show again will produce anything. We wouldn't remember it a year ago, or after 12 months. We don't know what will happen, so I'm not really optimistic at all.
And finally to Gil Hoffman in Jerusalem. Go ahead, Mr. Hoffman.
Well, Kamal, I am optimistic. I saw something special happen yesterday in Annapolis. I saw the Prime Minister of Israel tell the entire Arab world, and not just the Palestinians, that Israel is willing to go a long way in order to bring peace to the Middle East. I unfortunately didn't hear on the Palestinian side the same kind of willingness. I heard our Prime Minister in Israel talk about the suffering of the Palestinian people. I didn't hear the same thing back from Abu Mazen. And today, seeing mortar attacks emerge from the Gaza Strip just re-emphasize the fact that although everyone is dreaming of peace, we wake up to a reality in which Israeli civilians are being attacked every day from the Gaza Strip.
Okay, so those are our opening comments. I'm going to stay with you, Gil Hoffman in Jerusalem. A quote from Ehud Olmert. He said, I am paraphrasing slightly, I must say, the absence of governmental institutions and effective law enforcement mechanisms in the Palestinian territories deters us from moving forward too hastily. Less than 24 hours after he says that, there are missiles fired into Gaza and a policeman is killed. I realise those are in retaliation for the mortar attacks in the first place, but really, how can Ehud Olmert talk peace and be firing missiles the next day?
That's the strange dichotomy that we have in the Middle East right now. Because Abu Mazen isn't in control of the Gaza Strip, because he was overthrown there in a bloody coup by Hamas, Israel's talking peace with Abu Mazen while fighting back against Hamas in the Gaza Strip that attacks Israeli civilians every day. You know, the mortars that were fired today weren't because of Annapolis. It happened the day before. It happened the day before that. And unfortunately, it keeps on happening. Israel, if anything, hasn't responded in response to its citizens being attacked. And today it did, perhaps thinking that now that Annapolis is over, they can feel a little bit more free.
Let's put that to Abdul Bari Atwan in London. What do you make of this, Mr. Abdul? What can be done about these mortar fires from Gaza? As Gil Hoffman points out, President Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, doesn't have any control over them.
Well, I believe we should expect the worst from the Israeli side. I believe the Israelis restrained themselves. They were waiting for Annapolis conference to take place. After that, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a huge incursion into Gaza and committing more massacres, killing more Palestinians under the pretext of these missiles, which doesn't hurt anybody. So the Israelis are well prepared. They may want to put an end to the Hamas Pandistan in Gaza, and then to put it in a golden tray to Mahmoud Abbas to say, look, here is Gaza, back again to you. We did you another favor, and please come and sign peace treaty with us. Drop the right of return for Palestinian refugees. Drop your claim for full sovereignty over Jerusalem. And forget about the settlement or most of the settlements in the West Bank. I think this is the likely scenario which are going to witness after Annapolis. So I'm not surprised the Israeli firing missiles in Gaza. They did it before, and they are doing it now, and maybe they will intensify it in the future.
And I guess the same could be said of Hamas as well. Comment from you, Ambassador Wilcox, in Washington. What do you think could be done about this tit-for-tat rocket fire?
I think there's plenty of room for cynicism. And above all, the realities on the ground are going to have to change. The division in the Palestinian community between Fatah and Hamas, the West Bank and Gaza, is a severe obstacle to a sustained negotiation and a two-state peace. That problem ought to be addressed in parallel with negotiations that will go forward. Otherwise, I don't see how the Palestinians can negotiate in a unified manner and reach their objectives, or how Israel can have a strong and capable partner. There also has to be restraint on both sides, not only a cessation of the Qasem rocket attacks from Gaza, but restraint on the ground by the IDF in the West Bank. Nothing can destroy this process more quickly than a resumption of violence, and both sides must realize that.
Let's swing this back to Annapolis itself, Ambassador. The joint understanding that was produced just at the beginning of the conference. Apart from the formation of the so-called steering committee, I didn't see anything in there that was really specific. Other than the reference to the roadmap, there was no specific mentions of UN resolutions and things like that. Is it really a strong document that came out of Annapolis?
No, it is not a strong document, and that reflects the division between Israel and Palestine on the basic final status issues of Jerusalem, settlements, borders, security, and refugees. They could not even recite those issues, and they came out with a rather bland document. Nevertheless, they committed themselves to resume serious negotiations. One hopeful sign is that the U.S. has pledged to create a monitoring mechanism, the kind that's been absent in the past. There was no such monitoring mechanism that held both sides to account during the Oslo process, and that is a very important ingredient of successful negotiations, together with much more purposeful and strong U.S. mediation.
Gil Hoffman in Jerusalem, I'd like to ask you about that monitoring mechanism which Ambassador Wilcox spoke about. Just get an Israeli perspective on that. How effective do you really think the US can be in a monitoring and a judgmental role, given that they are quite openly more aligned with Israel?
There's no doubt that an American force can monitor adequately what's going on in the Middle East. they're going to have to make sure that the Palestinians don't attack Israeli civilians. There's no tit for tat here. When Israel responds, it responds against a Hamas command post, killing people that were ordering those attacks on Israeli civilians. That's very different than what's going on the other side. And so the new mediator, the new monitor, Jones, is going to come to the Middle East. He's going to learn the realities on the ground, and he's going to bring the two sides closer. I'm sure he's going to be cooperating with Tony Blair, who's working on building the foundations of democracy in a Palestinian state. And both sides really know what they have to do, and I think the monitor will only be helpful.
Abdul Bariatwan, just a view from you before we go to our first break. What do you think about the US's monitoring capabilities in this situation?
First, I'm surprised with your Jerusalem man portraying the Palestinians as if we are a superpower, as if, they are sending missiles, cruise missiles and Tomahawk missiles to Israel and killing people. It is the opposite completely. This is one thing. Second thing, I believe Annapolis talks ended before it has started. Monitoring steer committee, I don't believe it will have any effect. The Palestinian and the Israeli have been talking for the last 6 months, 8 meetings between Abbas and Uhud Olmert, about 20 meetings between the delegation or negotiation teams. The outcome is absolutely blank. They could not agree on a joint communique among themselves. After 6 months of talking, no communique. And Condoleezza Rice, the Foreign Secretary of the United States, actually was supervising these kind of talks. And so how can we expect these talks to be fruitful? The other point is, I believe President Bush communicated actually made it extremely difficult for the Palestinian when he talked about a Jewish state. This frightened the Palestinian. Frightened them. It means the end of right of return. It means also transferring 1.2 million Palestinian or Israeli Palestinian, as they call them, from Israel to maybe the West Bank or the future Palestinian state. So I believe because of this, because the American taking the Israeli sides from the beginning, I don't believe this negotiation could be fruitful.
Gentlemen, stay with us. We are going to go to a break just now. So after pledging a peace deal, President Abbas and Prime Minister Olmert now face the delicate task of selling painful concessions to their sceptical populations. When we come back, we'll focus on those two men and ask, will they be able to rally a popular support? Back in a moment.